Hi Mark, I'm Alice and my student number is 37 and I'm going to read the New York Times article, A Sister's Eulogy for Steve Jobs by Mona Simpson, October 30, 2011. I grew up as an only child with a single mother. Because we were poor and because I knew my fathers had emigrated from Syria, I imagined he looked like Omar Sharif. I hoped he would be rich and kind and would come into our lives and our not yet furnished apartment and help us. Later, after I'd met my father, I tried to believe he'd changed his numbers and left no forwarding address because he was an idealistic revolutionary plotting a new world for the Arab people. Even as a feminist, my whole life I'd been waiting for the man to love, who could love me. For decades, I thought that man would be my father. When I was 25, I met that man and he was my brother. By then, I lived in New York, where I was trying to write my first novel. I had a job at a small magazine in an office size of the closet, with 3 other aspiring writers. When one day a lawyer called me, the middle-class girls from California who hassles the boss to buy us health insurance, and say his client was rich and famous and was my long-lost brother. The young editors went wild. This was 1985 and he worked at the cutting-edge literary magazine. But I'd fallen into the plots of Dickens' novels and really, we all loved those best. The lawyer refused to tell me my brother's name and my colleagues started a betting pool. The leading candidate, John Travolta, I secretly hoped for the literary descendants of Henry James, someone more talented than I, someone brilliant without even trying. When I met Steve, he was a guy my age in jeans, Arab or Jewish looking and handsomer than Omar Sharif. We took a long walk some things, it happens, that we both like to do. I don't remember much of what we said that first day. Only that he felt like someone I'd picked to be a friend. He explained that he worked in computers. I didn't know much about computers. I still work on a manual Eulogy typewriter. I told Steve I'd recently considered my first purchase of the computer, something called the Chromemco. Steve told me it was a good thing I waited. He said he was making some things that was going to be insanely beautiful. I want to tell you the few things I learned from Steve during 3 distinct periods over the 27 years I knew him. They were not periods of years, but of states of being, his full life, his illness, his dying. Steve worked at what he loved. He worked really hard every day. That's incredibly simple, but true. He was absent-minded. He was never embarrassed about working hard, even if the results were failures. If someone as smart as Steve wasn't ashamed to admit trying, maybe I didn't have to be. When he got kicked out of Apple, things were painful. He told me about a dinner at which 5 Silicon Valley leaders met then sitting president. Steve hadn't been invited. He was hurt, but he still went to work at Next every single day. Novelty was not Steve's highest value, beauty was. For an innovator, Steve was remarkably loyal. If he loved a shirt, he'd order 10 or 100 of them. In the Palo Alto house, there was probably even enough black cotton turtlenecks for everyone in this church. He didn't favor trends or gimmicks. He liked people his own age. His philosophy of aesthetics reminds me of the quote that was something like this. Fashion is what seems beautiful, not but look ugly later. Art can be ugly at first, but it becomes beautiful later. Steve always aspired to make beautiful later. He was willing to be misunderstood. Uninvited to the ball, he drove the third and fourth iterations of Sam Black's sport car to Next, where he and his teams were quietly inventing the platforms on which Tim Berners-Lee would write the programs for the World Wide Web. Steve was like a girl in the amount of time he spent talking about love. Love was his supreme virtue, his god of gods. He tracked and worried about the romantic lives of people working with him. Whenever he saw the man he thought the woman might find dashing, he called out, "Hey, are you single? Do you want to come to dinner with my sister?" I remember when he phoned the day he met Lorraine. "There's a beautiful woman, and she's really smart, and she has a dog, and I'm going to marry her." When Ree was born, he began gushing and never stopped. He was a physical dad with each of his children. He fretted over Lisa's boyfriends and Orin's travel and Skirt's lengths and Eve's safety around his horse she adored. None of us who attended Reed's graduation party will ever forget the scenes of Reed and Steve slow dancing. His abiding love for Lorraine sustained him. He believed that love happened all the time, everywhere, in that most important way. Steve was never ironic, never cynical, never pessimistic. I tried to learn from that still. Steve had been successful at a young age, and he feels that he had isolated him. Most of the choices he made from the time I knew him were designed to dissolve the walls around him. A middle-class boy from Los Altos, he fell in love with the middle-class girls from New Jersey. It was important to both of them to raise Lisa, Reed, Erin, and Eve as grounded, normal children. The house didn't intimidate with arts or polish. In fact, for many of the first years I knew Steve and Lou together, dinner was served on the grass, and sometimes consisted of just one vegetable, lots of that one vegetable. But one broccoli in season, simply prepared with just the right recent snip herb. Even as a young millionaire, Steve always picked me up at the airport. He'd be standing there in his jeans. When the family members called him at work, he secretly Lenita answers. When the family member called him at work, his secretary Lenita answered, "Your dad's in the meeting. Would you like me to interrupt him?" When Reed insists to dressing up at the speech every Halloween, Steve, Lorraine, Erin, and Eve all went weekend. They once embarked on the kitchen remodel. It took years. They cooked on a hot plate in the garage. The Pixar building, under construction during the same period, finished in half the time. And that was it for the Palo Alto house. The bathroom stayed old, and this was a crucial distinction, it had been a great house to start with. Steve saw to that. This is not to say that he didn't enjoy his success. He enjoyed his success a lot, just minus a few zeros. He told me how much he loved going to the Palo Alto bike stores and gleefully realizing he could afford to buy the best bike there. And he did. Steve was humble. Steve liked to keep learning. Once, he told me if he'd grown up differently, he might have become a mathematician. He spoke reverently about college and loved walking around the Stanford campus. In the last years of his life, he studied a book of painting by Mark Rothko, an artist he hadn't known about before, thinking of what could inspire people on the walls of the future's Apple campus. Steve cultivated whimsy. What other CEO knows the histories of English and Chinese tea roses and has a favorite David Austin rose? He had surprise tucked in all his pockets. I've ventured that Lorraine will discover treats, songs he loves, a point he cut out and put in the drawer even after 20 years of an exceptionally close marriage. I spoke to him every other day or so, but when I opened the New York Times and saw features on the company's patents, I was still surprised and delighted to see a sketch for a perfect staircase. With his 4 children, with his wife, with all of us, Steve had a lot of fun. He treasures happiness. Then Steve became ill and we watched his life compressed to a smaller circle. Once he loved walking through Paris. He discovered a small handsome soba shop in Kyoto. He downhill skied gracefully. He cross-country skied clumsily. No more. Eventually, even ordinary pleasures, like a good peach, no longer appealed to him. Yet, what amazed me, and what I learned from his illness, was how much was still left after so much had been taken away. I remember my brother learning to walk again, with a chair, after his liver transplant. Once a day he would get up on legs and seemed too thin to bear him. Arms pitched to the chair back, he'd push that chair down the Memphis hospital corridor towards the nursing station, and then he'd sit down on the chair, rest, turn around, and walk back again. He counted his steps and each day pressed a little farther. Lorraine got down on her knees and looked into his eyes. "You can do this, Steve," he said. His eyes widened. His lips pressed into each other. He tried, he always tried, and always with love at the core of that effort. He was an intensely emotional man. I realized during that terrifying time that Steve was not enduring the pain for himself. His set destinations, his son's risk graduation from high school, his daughter arranged trips to Kyoto, the launchings of a boat he was building on which he planned to take his family around the world and where he hoped he and Lorraine would someday retire. Even ill, his taste, his discrimination, and his judgment held. He went through 67 nurses before finding kindred spirits, and then he completely trusted the 3 who stayed with him to the end: Tracy, Arturo, Elham. One time when Steve had contracted a tenacious pneumonia, his doctors forbade everything, even ice. We were in a standard ICU unit. Steve, who generally disliked cutting in line or dropping his own name, confessed that these ones he liked to be treated a little specially. I told him, "Steve, this is special treatment." He leaned over to me and said, "I want it to be a little more special." Intubated, when he couldn't talk, he asked for a notepad. His gauge device to hold an iPad in a hospital bed. He designed a new fluid monitors and X-ray equipment. He redrew that not quite special enough hospital unit, and every time his wife walked into the room, I watched his smile remark itself on his face. "For the really big things you have trust me," he wrote on his sketch pad. He looked up, "You have to." By that, he meant that we should disobey the doctors and give him the piece of ice. None of us knows for certain how long we'll be here. On Steve's better days, even in the last years, he embarked upon projects and elicited promise from his friend at Apple to finish them. Some boat builders in the Netherlands have a gorgeous stainless steel hull ready to be covered with the finishing wood. His 3 daughters remain unmarried, his 2 youngest still girls, and he'd want to walk them down the aisle as he'd walked me the day of my wedding. We all, in the end, died in medias res, in the middle of the story, of many stories. I suppose it's not quite accurate to call the death of someone who lived with the cancers for years unexpected, but Steve's death was unexpected for us. What I learned from my brother's death was that character is essential. What he was how he died. Tuesday morning, he called me to ask me to hurry up to Palo Alto. His tone was affectionate, dear, loving, but like someone whose luggage was already strapped onto the vehicle, who was already on the beginning of the journey. Even as he was sorry, truly deeply sorry, to be leaving us. He started his farewell and I stopped him. I said, "Wait, I'm coming. I'm in a taxi to the airport. I'll be there. I'm telling you now because I'm afraid you won't make it on time, honey." When I arrived, he and his Lorraine were joking together like partners who live and work together every day of their lives. He looked into his children's eyes as if he couldn't unlock his gaze. Until about 2 in the afternoon, his wife could rouse him to talk to his friends from Apple. Then, after a while, it was clear that he would no longer wake to us. His breathing changed. It became severe, deliberate, purposeful. I could feel him counting his steps again, pushing farther and before. This is what I learned. He was working at this, too. That didn't happen to Steve. He achieved it. He told me, when he was saying goodbye and telling me he was sorry, so sorry we wouldn't be able to be all together as we'd always planned, that he was going to the better place. Dr. Fishers gave him a 50-50 chance of making it through the night. He made it through the night. Lorraine next to him on the bed sometimes jerks up when there was a longer pause between his breath. She and I looked at each other, then he would leave a deep breath and begin again. This had to be done. Even now, he had a stern, still handsome profile, the profile of an absolutist, a romantic. His breath indicates an arduous journey, some steep path, altitude. He seemed to be climbing, but with that will, that work ethic, that strength, there was also sweet stiff capacities for wonderment. The artist believed in the ideal, the still more beautiful latter. Steve's final works, hours earlier, were monosyllables, repeated 3 times. Before embarking, he looked at his sister Patty, then for a long time at his children, then at his life's partner Lorraine, and then over their shoulders past them. Steve's final words were, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow." Mona Simpson is a novelist and the professor of English at the University of California, Los Angeles. Since 1988, he had held the Samuelson-Levy Chair in Language and Literature at Bard College. She delivered these eulogies for her brother Steve Jobs on October 16, 2011, at his memorial service at the Memorial Church of Stanford University. I finished my reading. Thank you, Mark. Bye-bye.